Okay, this video is what is the path to original work in medicine? To do original work in medicine, it takes a long time to get there because you have to know a lot and have a lot of experience before you can see new things. So the way it all starts is when you're in high school or beginning of college, you see things that make you interested in medicine. Somebody who's sick in your family or somebody who's in healthcare in your family. And you usually see only the high points, or they tell you the high points, but it gets you motivated. You figure you got to do something. So you go to college, and the pre-med curriculum is very tedious. In retrospect, it's kind of stupid because 95% of it's sort of irrelevant to being a doctor, but you have to do it. It's mostly, I would call it a contest to see who's willing to be conformist enough and work hard enough to, learn calculus and physics. You really don't need any calculus or physics, none whatsoever, to be a doctor. I'm a triple boarded high-tech doctor, okay? I don't use any math I didn't know by fourth grade, all right? Sorry to burst your bubble, but that's the truth of the amount of math you actually need to be a doctor. So you have to grind through college, and then pay your dues and get the grades. And it really is just a proof that you're willing to study that much and you're willing to go through that. Doctors, a lot of doctors are not that smart, but they're all real hard workers. You cannot be a doctor unless you're a hard worker. There's a lot of work to be done. Okay, so then what's the fun part? Once you get done with med school, I thought residency was actually kind of fun because I kept learning new stuff. So that's why I liked residency most of the time. It was interesting. You keep on increasing your level of sophistication and personal performance in, for example, doing surgical procedures. You build up from just being able to sit there and hold a retractor to being able to do major parts, if not the entire procedure. So that's a time of rapid learning, so the curve goes up rapidly. Then you hit private practice or you hit your job as an attending. Attending physician is somebody who's completed residency and fellowship. And that's a bit of a challenge because you're used to in a residency program, a fellowship program, having a lot of people around to help you. If you don't know what to do, you ask the attending, the other fellow. But when you're on your own, let's say in private practice or just running the room yourself at a university, you have to know. There is no one else to help you. So I think that still was a reasonably good pace of continuing to learn, and that's pretty interesting. I, like other doctors, I bought the myth that doctors are fully trained in medical knowledge. It wasn't until I had my own, obesity problems in my 30s, because I was working too much for a while, that I started to study all this stuff. Plus my parents went through medical problems and I couldn't find any of the answers in the books, and I couldn't find any answers when I talked to the specialists. Okay, but now I'm getting to what I think is the key point. You hit a fork in the road. And at the fork in the road, you basically say, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? This will be, depending on how much specialty training. An internal medicine doc only goes to 3 years of post-med school training. But if you do a fellowship, let's say in a longer residency and a fellowship, you might not get out for 7-8 years post-med school before you make your first non-house staff dollar number one. Okay, so anyways, the point is, after a little bit of time as an attending, you start to realize, am I just going to do the same thing every day and be bored out of my mind? Which is actually what the vast majority of docs do. If you just stay in the conformist pattern and generate billing codes, you'll make decent money. You'll probably have to work long hours, but you'll make decent money, and it's pretty reliable. You might be bored out of your mind. The smarter you are, then the more boring it gets, because it's relatively tedious and repetitive generating all these billing codes. Okay, so what's the other option? If you decide to do, and this is also a lot of researchers are just like this, they do predictable micro questions in their field, okay? Versus if you try to do new stuff and learn new things, what you're going to have to do is read outside your field. And then you're going to have to read nutrition and toxicology if you want to have anything to do with treating and understanding chronic diseases. And this path doesn't give you any money. You'll get grant money if you're doing predictable micro questions pleasing the big companies. But if you're actually trying to figure things out on your own or do original work, you will be amazed at what a desert it is. It's like no man's land. And whenever I would apply for research funding for a good product, it would get rejected. I wouldn't even get out of the beginner level to get funding for project after project. It was obvious to me they didn't want me. I developed the entire theory of, there was earlier papers on ischemic cause of degenerative disc disease, but I figured out the whole thing from sacrum on up to the skull with regard to, you know, how DISH goes together with OPLL and OLF. It's all degenerative disc disease. It's all the same thing. Okay, that's a topic for another day. I've already given lectures on that. But what I was shocked by, you know, Spine Journal would not respond, would not publish it. All the funding agents, they wouldn't give me any funding because there's no money in it. Okay, I figured out the theory of neurovascular uncoupling for dementia, which is so much better than the Alzheimer's theory. It's not even funny. I can't get that published either. That's why I wrote books about it too. So what I'm saying is when you decide to actually try to do something useful, you will find that you most likely will run into all kinds of problems. Your colleagues will give you good feedback as to whether or not you're doing something useful and you're on the right track. But the big money institutions, they will want nothing to do with it most likely. Because the sad truth is the regular people of society, the proletariat, the proles, they have no money. There's nothing they can do except, you know, say thank you, and they can't give you any money. So in the meantime, you'll find out also that you won't get support to do research. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's kind of a nice thing to do MD, PhD. It's kind of nice to be wealthy if you could make that happen. So you'll have time to do stuff. You know, like one of my heroes in the past was Ben Franklin, because he got rich by the time he's 38 and he could spend the rest of his life just doing what he wanted. Versus if you're going to get money from the medical system, you're going to have to do what the medical system wants, which is generate the standard billing codes, which usually means drugs and surgery or something like that. But anyways, this makes life a lot more interesting because you get old and you're bored if you do the same thing every day. If you got a high IQ, I mean, it gets tedious. You know, when you have kids and they're young, you got to help out a lot. There's a lot to be done with them. But then kids grow up and they want to go with their friends. They don't want to talk to you. So you need to decide if you want to do it. So anyways, this is the path I've taken, and I do find lots of interest and enjoyment from it. But I can assure you, there is zero support for it in the standard healthcare system. None. It is actually indirectly frowned upon. And as you get more prominent and higher up in this game, it is more aggressively frowned upon. There is zero interest in it, okay? You look around, you see what happens to the docs who do this. Look at T. Colin Campbell. They tried to fire him. Esselstyn, they wouldn't allow him to have to see patients at the Cleveland Clinic for his stuff. And McDougall, none of the other doctors would send him a referral. That's what tends to happen to a doctor who becomes interested in nutrition, and even worse in toxicology. So on the other hand, if you don't study those things, you're not going to be able to help the patients with chronic disease because almost all of it is caused by problems with diet and toxicology. So anyways, what am I sort of saying? And this reminds me too, I've read books about guys who did great things in other fields, and this is very commonly the fact. Unless you're making money for the big corporations, you're kind of on your own. And so why do it? I think the reason to do it would just be because it's fascinating. You want to do something useful and meaningful with your life, and also because you can't think of what else to do. You know, be sort of bored or be a bored non-entity, you know, down this path. If you really got an active mind, that's going to be boring. Now, you could do something. It's good to have a hobby, maybe in something outside your field. Just do it as a hobby. And if that makes you happy, fine. But this is the path. If I could do it all over again, it would be nice to be in something where high intelligence and effort is rewarded. You know, maybe in computer tech. But this is sort of what I've been in, and this is what I really like studying this stuff. There's no easy answer to that. But anyways, this is what it's all about. Climbing up this rocky path with lots of ups and downs. So anyways, there it is.